Hello, everyone. Welcome to our 10th Discovery Workshop. Today's workshop is focused on professional associations in the composting industry. We are so glad to have you here. My name is Candy Castellanos, and I'm one of the project co-facilitators, and I'm here with Ariel Sullivan, my partner in crime, the other project co-facilitator. And we will be starting with a brief overview of the project and then diving right into the panelists' conversations. So again, so great to see all of you here, and I'm gonna share my screen so we can jump right in. All right. So this is the Improving the Circularity of Compostables and Compost Whole System Strategic Planning Project. We are doing a long on-ramp of discovery for this project, and we are in a series of 14 discovery workshops, and this is number 10, focused on professional associations. The Future Search Initiative involves stakeholders from various industries, and some stakeholders may be considered competitors in the marketplace. The Future Search process shall not be used to obtain individual company advantage, nor used in any pursuit of any anti-competitive objective. To do so may violate state and federal antitrust laws. By participating in the Future Search events in this process, you agree to abide by the restrictions set in this statement. So everybody improving the whole system. So here we are all together. This project is like an hourglass. We begin with everybody. We funnel to a very concentrated group of 200 in September to do a 3-day whole system strategic planning event. And then we come back out with a common ground agenda and action plans with work that everybody is ready and willing to do. And so it is everybody improving whole systems. And ultimately, this project is about imagining a future where there's cohesive and seamless collaboration across organizations that are part of the U.S. composting system. We are guided by an amazing group of individuals from across the system. We meet every other week, and the incredible support that we have guides us in our planning for the strategic planning event in September and in these discovery workshops. We have a number of amazing partners in this project that helped us launch. And so just want to share our deep appreciation for all the organizations that you see here that have been committed partners from the beginning. And just want to highlight kind of really what this project is about. And so like any organization that does strategic planning, this is strategic planning for a whole system. And so this is a system change effort that's focused on engaging pioneers like all of you from all parts of the system to come together and create a shared vision and a collective roadmap toward optimizing the circular economy for the U.S. composting industry. And so this work centers, but is not limited to food contact compostables. And the strategic planning work will be guided by a process called Future Search. So you hear us talk a lot about circularity. What do we mean by that? And so for the U.S. composting system, it means that the intentions of compostability are realized for compostable packaging and organic materials, and that the end products produced are able to be put back into meaningful use. So the first order of business for the steering committee was identifying what are the priorities for this project. And so number one, designing an inclusive and whole system circularity model for the health of the composting industry that maximizes environmental benefits, that improves collaboration and coordination between all stakeholders, that improves information flow, that directs more food waste to commercial composting facilities, that creates value and confidence for all stakeholders, and to shift stakeholder behavior to mitigate contamination. This project has 3 pieces. We are in the first phase. So we are doing discovery workshops leading up to the whole system strategic planning event in September in Denver. And then we are co-facilitating the structures of support to activate the strategic plan that is developed. And so as part of this work, we've got this amazing discovery workshop series.
Yeah, so we are here at number 10, professional associations. We have 4 left after today. We've added number 12, which is the origin and evolution of food contact packaging. It's really understanding the history and kind of the trajectory of food contact packaging. And as I put in the chat just a couple moments ago, the link to the data from the first 7. So We'll have 8 through 10 up there probably within the next week or so. But that just shows you the themes and the insights that are coming out from all these various stakeholder groups. And it's paints a pretty good picture of the current state and what might be needed. Lots of ideas. And that will be input used in the strategic planning process. So it's data driven. And as well, if you have not RSVP'd for this, if you want to share this with anyone, I'm going to put the link to join this series. We usually send out the meeting invitations about a week prior. So if you don't have meetings scheduled the last 4, like that's okay. You don't need to register again. And if you are interested in coming to the event, if you've been coming to these discovery workshops, you've been super engaged and you want to be in the room, like please fill out the interest form. That's the other link that I have in there. And we'll get a sense of what representation are we lacking and we need more of to have a good diverse mix of perspectives in the room. And we can go to the next slide. Oop. Yeah, the meetings are every other Thursday from 12 to 1:30 Eastern. So and from a process standpoint, we're going to switch into our panelists. So we're going to spend about 3 minutes per panelist per question. And we're going to hear from everyone. And if you have questions, please put them in the chat. We send out a follow-up Q&A that has answers to those questions that is also accessible on that drive that I just put in the Google folder. And yeah, without further ado, I think we can shift to introducing our panelists. So we have a really, really good representation of folks today. We have Frank Franciosi, who's the Executive Director from the U.S. Composting Council, Ashley Elzinga, Director of Sustainability and Outreach, Foodservice Packaging Institute, FPI, Benjamin Crumstock, Executive Director from the Illinois Food Scrap and Composting Coalition, Katie Gavitt, Associate Manager of Operations, Member Services, Communications, and Events from the Green Sports Alliance, Olga Kachuk, Sustainable Packaging Coalition. Her responses will be coming in by proxy. We'll be reading them into the room. We have Kate Kurtz, who's the President of Washington Organics Recycling Council, Neil Edgar, Executive Director from the California Compost Coalition. So welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here. And these are our 4 questions. We're going to start with the first question, and I'll just read it out. Tell us about your organization. What is your organization's mission? Hold on. And the role it plays within the composting space. When was your organization established? Who are your members or stakeholders, and what are some of their priorities? Let's start with you, Frank. And you are on mute.
Okay, now I'm not. Thanks for inviting me. I do have to drop off a little bit early, but our Deputy Director, Lyndon Norris Walt, will be able to answer any questions or after I have left. Organization, the U.S. Composting Council was established in 1990. It was actually established as the Solid Waste Composting Association. After about 2 years, people realized it's really tough to compost solid waste. So the name was changed to the U.S. Composting Council. And our mission is really multifunctional. We act as the voice of the industry from a policy and lobbying perspective. We also are involved with education more on not the direct training side, because we have a foundation that does that, but more on outreach, general public outreach, and also regarding policy as well. And then we also really believe in really maintaining circular economy through returning organics back to the soil, which is extremely important. As far as our members and stakeholders, I believe everybody that's here on this committee, on this group, are stakeholders and are members. If you're not a member, shame on you. You should join as a member. The big areas that we really have are mainly compost manufacturers, which make up about, I would say, 50 to 55% of our membership. And then we have a lot of allied businesses, everybody from academia through compostable products companies, formulators, haulers, so pretty much and community composters. So pretty much the whole gamut of stakeholders in the industry. And some of our priorities most recently have been around policy and really spending more dollars and putting more staff time and bodies in with policy, both on the national level as well as on the state level. And then also on professional development, really looking at standards of the industry, as well as growing our employees for the industry with professional development, with PDHs and also through our compost university system.
Great. Thank you, Frank. Let's go over to Ashley.
Hi, thank you guys. My name is Ashley Elzinga. I'm the Director of Sustainability and Outreach for the Foodservice Packaging Institute. FPI, we are the trade association for the food service packaging industry. We were established in 1933, so getting close to 100 years there. Food service packaging was created because what used to happen is you didn't have a drinking fountain. You used to have a bucket with a cup that everybody drank out of. So as you can tell, I don't think that is that would be allowed in today's day. So that's really where food service packaging started, is to be a safe and sanitary vector for packaging. Our core membership is raw material suppliers, which would be the paper mills, the resin suppliers, things like that. Our converters, which are the manufacturers of those materials, and then those machinery manufacturers that make that converting machinery. FPI, we encourage the responsible use of all food service packaging, and we promote its benefits and our members' products. As Frank said, we are the voice of the food service packaging industry. We represent about 90% of the manufacturing capacity here in North America, US and Canada specifically. And we provide a legal forum to address challenges and opportunities that are facing our industry. I would say, especially in my day-to-day work, FPI started recovery groups looking at recycling and composting, advancing both of those efforts, but over a decade ago. And so really that is a lot of what I do in my day-to-day. So I would say that's definitely one of our main goals with the association. I think that covers everything.
Perfect. Thank you, Ashley. Let's go over to Benjamin.
Good morning. I'm Benjamin Crumstock, Executive Director over at the Illinois Food Scrap and Composting Coalition. Organization began in 2012. It was a town hall meeting in the Chicago area. A bunch of different stakeholders from across a spectrum of interest groups, including municipalities who wanted to start to divert their food organics. The organization was formally organized in 2016. As the Illinois Food Scrap Coalition. In 2023, we took the step of adding and composting to the name, recognizing that the composters themselves were not anxious for this feedstock, and we wanted to allay the fears that we were just a food scrap oriented organization. And our relationship with the USCC, we serve as the Illinois chapter of the USCC, and it's a relationship that's been present in some form since at least 2018. As far as the mission, it may be slightly different than some in that it's all organics and all responsible and prudent recycling methods. The mission is to advance the diversion, the composting or recycling in general, and then the prudent use of the composts and other digestate if it's an anaerobic digestion context. And our vision is to see Illinoisans, perceive this organic material as a valuable product and not a waste product. The stakeholders are, I always describe it as the full spectrum. We've got the grassroots community. They're homeowners, residents who just want the food diverted from their homes. They don't want to get bogged down in how it happens, where it goes, how the magic happens. We have the generators at scale, restaurants, other event facilities, educators, environmental advocates, municipalities and solid waste agencies, the haulers, both the large scale names you would recognize, and then the local smaller scale dedicated food scrap haulers. And then the organics recyclers. It's predominantly composters, but we do have 2 members who have anaerobic digestion facilities. What we're trying to develop is the compost use community and getting the compost back into the ground. Priorities, diversion, again, that's the origin. Food scrap as a principal topic of conversation, but since the infrastructure is based on all organics, we've got that in mind. Trying to work now to see if we can find out how we can get different approaches in different areas. The rural part of Illinois is not the same as the northeast quadrant, the Chicago metro area, so the solutions could be different in different parts of the state. We want to make sure that we're working to make sense in different parts of the state. We want to increase the capacity and the accessibility of the infrastructure. And then, of course, like everybody else, we are really, really focused on getting the compost back into the ground, increasing that compost market development. Thank you.
Thank you. Katie, let's go to you.
Hi, everyone. Katie Gavitt. I'm the Associate Manager of Operations, Member Services, Events, and Communications for the Green Sports Alliance. The Green Sports Alliance is a 501c6 trade organization, so we're membership-based. Our mission is to leverage the culture and market influence of sports to promote healthy, sustainable communities where we work, live, and play. So the role that it plays within the composting space, while we have all of our members come from all walks of life, most of them are pro sports teams, leagues, and venues, or collegiate. And then the other part of our membership base are corporate members or nonprofits, which we like to call our solutions partners. So what we do as a whole is we make these connections. Sports teams have a lot of unique set of issues when it comes to trying to become more sustainable. And what we can do is connect them with either local companies that we find have a good solution for them, or just solutions as a whole. Within the composting space, a lot of our members do work in this space, and some of the people on this call are members of ours right now. So that's anyone from waste haulers, packaging products, and kind of everything in between to try and get this this whole system created. And our priorities are really just to make sports become more sustainable. They're inherently not. So that is our mission, to help them out.
Great. Thanks, Katie. All right, I'm going to speak to Olga's response. So Olga is the director of the Sustainable Packaging Coalition, and she says the Sustainable Packaging Coalition is a program of GreenBlue, a nonprofit whose mission is to accelerate our transition to a just and sustainable materials economy. The Sustainable Packaging Coalition is a membership-based group with nearly 600 member companies and is the leading voice on sustainable packaging. Our work focuses on helping our member companies make progress on their sustainable packaging goals with innovation, policy, packaging design, and recovery projects. Compostable packaging is considered an innovative packaging format that could be the right choice for companies, depending on the packaging application. And I'm going to hand it off to Kate.
Great. Hi, thanks for having me on the panel today. Today I am here representing Washington Organic Recycling Council. And we call ourselves WORC by spelling out our acronym. So WORC was established in 1991 in response to demands for increased organic recycling, new regulations that were coming at the state level, and also municipal programs that were being developed, in addition to large commercial facilities that were being established around that time. Today, we're an 18-person volunteer board, of which I am a member. So I am the current president of the board. We take turns though, so that I want to make it clear that I'm just taking my turn. I'm not like the executive director or anything like that. So we are a volunteer-run organization with the support of a part-time administrator that we hire through a nonprofit management company, right, to help us do like our bookkeeping and make sure our taxes are paid and things like that. But otherwise, all of the work that is done by WARC is done by a volunteer board and through our membership. And so what do? We support organics recycling, all kinds of organics recycling. So similar to Illinois, it's mostly composting. And we bring together stakeholders and we do a lot of education. We do some legislative advocacy that has been more active over the last few years here in Washington State. Our membership is, we're a diverse group from, across the organics recycling like stakeholders, right? So we have waste processors, mostly composters, but some AD, some biochar producers, government folks. So that's me, and my day job is that I work, I'm a government person. I work for City of Seattle. We have consultants, educators, university folks, researchers, students, and also private citizens that are just really gung-ho about composting. One thing that we all have in common is that we all firmly believe in and work to support the organics recycling industry here in Washington State. That's what really brings us together. So priorities for our organization right now, education. First and foremost, I'd say we want to have well-trained operators in our state. We want informed regulators and municipal program managers. The way that we do this is primarily through, we've been running a compost facility operator training, like a 5-day intensive, hands-on training for several decades now. We typically do host several webinars every year. We host an annual conference, things, that's how we approach education. Another priority, similar to what I've heard from other compost organizations, is compost market development. So making sure that the compost is really used as a beneficial soil amendment. So one thing that I think WARC is known for is our Soils for Salmon program. So this was established starting in the early 2000s. And what it does is like primarily is working with state regulations, county regulations to ensure that that compost needs to be used in the soil with post-construction. So we have like in our state stormwater manual today, we have a post-construction soil quality and depth requirement, which is really pretty cool. So there's like minimum organic matter standards that have to be met, which helps to drive compost markets, of course, but also to ensure that our soils are healthy and absorbing rainwater. And if you haven't heard, it actually rains quite a bit here in Western Washington. And that improves water quality for our salmon and other aquatic life. Other things that we have done recently for compost market development is advocate for some compost reimbursement programs. And I'm proud to say that today in Washington State, we have compost reimbursement programs through the Washington State Department of Agriculture, local conservation districts, and also our regional USDA offices, which is pretty cool.
Great, thank you, Kurt. Neil, let's hear from you.
Good morning, I'm Neil Edgar. Our group, California Composting Coalition, is a little bit unique. It's a lobbying coalition, strictly focusing on advocacy work on legislative and regulatory issues in California, but I also work on national issues. I'm a board member at the U.S. Composting Council, where I work for Frank and Linda. Also work with other advocacy groups in other states to advise on our policy experience here in California. We were founded in 2002, predominantly to address persistent herbicide contamination issues, which were a a buzz at the time. And we aim to increase the recycling of organic materials, keep them out of landfills, and further the use of clean compost. So our members are predominantly service providers for municipalities throughout California who process yard trimmings and increasingly food materials to meet our lofty climate goals here in our SB 1383. We also have local government, technology providers, packaging manufacturers, haulers, and other diverse stakeholder members.
Great, thanks, Neil. We're going to go to question number 2.
That's great. So our second question is, what does your organization believe are the greatest opportunities created by improving the circularity of the U.S. composting system? And so we're going to start with Frank.
Yeah, so it doesn't get any more circular than compost. I mean, think about it, where plant and protein starts. It all starts from the soil. You have to feed protein plant material in order for it to grow. So being part of our food system and also our landscapes, the most important part is the impact of compost, the product, and composting, the verb. If you think about all the things that the benefits of composting, and you look at stacking those on top of each other one by one, you have greenhouse gas avoidance, which is a big one. You have carbon sequestration, another big one. The avoidance of using fertilizer, which helps as far as carbon footprint goes, as well as greenhouse gas reduction or avoidance. Water savings, disease suppression, so less use of herbicides and pesticides, as well as fungicides. And then the overall microbial population and biota in the soil. If you look at all these things and you start putting a dollar value on them, it is unbelievable how compost can impact our environment and our economy when you look at all the benefits that it could do. So by moving organics, and specifically with this group, food scrap, to composting versus landfilling is a major investment, but it also has a great return on that investment. So I would say that's probably the greatest opportunity that we have all in front of us right now.
That's great. Thank you. All right, Ashley.
Yeah, I mean, I would echo, kind of what Frank says. It's really helping to divert food waste, right? Food waste is probably one of the largest portions of the waste stream that we have right now for municipal solid waste. I think it's estimated anywhere between 30 to 33%. And, our compostable packaging can help with that. We see, we could see great diversion if we are increasing composting access. We'll have a less carbon footprint, we'll have less litter. Our industry, we spend the money on innovative materials, processes, what have you, and we want our products to be composted. So I think helping divert that food waste is really the biggest opportunity that we have.
That's great. Thank you so much. Benjamin.
Sorry, I'm muted. A few things just in terms of education, adjusting the perception of the public. So understanding that this is not a waste stream. This is a resource. It's an important resource. Teaching the contamination mitigation and best management practices so that there's some standardization and understanding whether you live in town A or town B or relocate to town C. I think those are important things. And just teaching the benefits of compost and compost use from a market development perspective, just getting those products, getting the composts into the ground so that there's an opportunity for the composters to be willing and to engage in the complicated feedstock that is food. If there's no outlet for what they already manufacture, then we're going to have a problem. So we really need to teach the compost benefits, as Frank was talking about, so that society at large buys into the rest of the circularity. And the other thing is that the policy consultant role or the policy discussion. It's really important that people understand that while you may have an interest in some particular policy, you have to really see the whole picture. So there are not unintended and unfortunate consequences. And I think that our participation in crafting legislation or reviewing other organizations, draft bills to help with that is really important. And understanding that we're an honest broker is really important.
That's great. Honest broker. Yeah, it's really powerful. All right. Katie.
Yeah, so like I was saying before, we act as a convener and a connector to a lot of these folks. And I believe the greatest opportunity to create improvement is really just getting all these people in one room to get on the same page. It seems like there are so many moving pieces when it comes to composting in general, especially on such a large scale, like at a venue or a stadium. So getting facilities, getting all of your cleaning staff, getting the waste hauler, getting everyone else who plays a part in composting, they all need to work together. For example, a lot of you may know California passed the 1383 law, and which requires everyone to compost in the state. And most cities were scrambling because they didn't have trucks, they didn't have bins, they didn't have anywhere to put the compost. So, they really did have to work together and come together and in one room and say, this is how we're going to do this. And really the best way to improve it is unfortunately to create laws like that. And so legislators have to come together and give the infrastructure and give the tools to these folks so that they're not left feeling like they can't do it on their own.
No, that's great. Yeah, thank you so much. I'm going to read into the room Olga Kuchik's response, who's the director of the Sustainable Packaging Coalition. And so her response is, today, circularity is mostly defined by recycling, but this is a limited framing of circularity. We also need to deal with the other bio side of the circular economy. Capturing food waste and other compostable material like certified compostable packaging is a huge untapped opportunity for circularity. We know that food waste in landfills is a leading source of emissions and climate change. Cities have an opportunity to tackle these problems by creating new infrastructure and collection programs and by including certified compostable packaging in these programs. And so we're going to go next to Kate with work.
Hi. Okay. So what does our organization believe are the greatest opportunities created by improving the circularity of the compost system? Okay. My answer is just like really simple and it's already been stated. So of course, resource conservation and waste reduction, green waste and food waste in particular is full of all of the nutrients and carbon that, are either mined from the soil or the atmosphere during growing of food, plants mostly. Of course, soil health. So soil health for both food production and for healthy landscapes. A moment ago, I mentioned the importance of a healthy soil to be able to absorb and retain stormwater. And of course, climate change mitigation. So both from reducing greenhouse gas emissions, especially those associated with landfilling food waste, we're able to just get, bypass those, like all the methane production and the soil carbon sequestration that happens as a result of using compost as a soil amendment.
That's great. Thank you for those additions. All right, Neil.
Yes, Frank, Ben, Kate and others mentioned, we think the greatest opportunities lie in all of the tremendous environmental benefits of composting, keeping organics out of landfills, making beneficial use of those resources, and by completing the organics recycling loop and reducing greenhouse gas emissions, reducing the use of petro-based fertilizers, pesticides, and herbicides in agriculture, we can create a healthier food system. Also, the reduction of those chemicals in landscaping, and reducing water consumption, creating green jobs here in California and across the country, And then we take a focus on mitigating potential impacts on disadvantaged communities from the misplaced use of those resources. So air quality and water quality concerns in California are substantial, and facility operators here have to continue to invest in mitigation measures and new technologies to help make sure that we are an environmentally beneficial partner in our mission to recycle those organics and get them back into the soils.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much.
All right, we're going to go to question number 3. So question number 3 is, what have been some of the greatest challenges your members have dealt with when trying to create solutions for issues they faced around composting? Start with Frank.
Yeah, I think a lot of us face these same issues. In number one, we don't have enough infrastructure, right? We all know that. And we have areas in the country specifically where there are compost deserts. And so that's one issue. Another big issue is data. On a national level, we don't have really good tracking data that the federal government would be able to provide. You know, the industry very much is regulated on the state level from permitting and also for product distribution. So those are two big areas I think we need to have really hardcore, make states be required to report numbers, hardcore numbers on what they're bringing in feedstock wise, and then also how much of their compost, what their capacity is, what their throughput is. We need to know where we are before we know where we're going to go. And so we're kind of going around here without GPS. And some of those other issues are also related by state. Permitting is scattered throughout the states. Some states have great permitting. Some states have no permitting. California takes 6-7 years to get a permit. In Alabama, there's no permitting. So that needs to be standardized a little bit more. And the council's working on that with our model compost template rules. As far as the other issue with permitting is siting and zoning, which is a major issue when you're looking at siting these facilities. And then I would say funding in general. The federal government has not provided any funding on a national level to support the industry. And I think that's something that everybody should be involved in from a policy and advocacy and lobbying standpoint, because that benefits everybody that's on this call. And then a couple other things that some of the other speakers talked about was public education. I think it's everybody's responsibility, specifically the brand companies, to really educate the public on what composting is, where it goes, how it's used, and also source separation at the point of generation. Because I think, you know, the cleaner our compost is, the more value there is in it. And the higher value means higher dollars for our compost manufacturer members, but it also makes a quality product better for better use and expands the end uses for compost.
Great, thank you, Frank. Ashley.
Yeah, I have write the list. So I think there are quite a few different challenges in the, you know, beginning of life for our products and the end of life. You know, a lot of it is our customers, which are the brands and the distributors, you know, and the consumer pressures, their customers. You know, they want that silver bullet package or material. You know, they want to keep the food the way it came out of the restaurant. They want it hot or they want it cold. You know, they have to be protected from tampering and leaking, you know, and then they want it to be compostable and or recyclable. So that's a tall order for a small package. You know, so there's the silver bullet conundrum, I like to call it. Frank already said infrastructure. There is definitely not enough infrastructure within the US. So we definitely, you know, that is a big hurdle. And I know composters look-alike contamination, you know, end users, when they're at the bins, they can't tell the difference between, you know, a regular plastic cup or, you know, a compostable PLA cup. So look-alike contamination, which also stems into education. You know, Frank said brands need to educate, but I mean, also municipalities do too. Like municipalities are the ones who at the residential level are in charge of, you know, the waste policies and who, you know, who's able to pick up and who's able to operate within their boundaries. So, you know, education from municipalities is also critical. And then EPR policy is a big one as well. You know, I think there's a lot of things that could, you know, be good that come from EPR policies, but this is kind of my personal opinion and not the opinion of FPI, but in the race to be the first with these policies isn't always means that it's the best. And so I think there's a lot of missed opportunities there when it comes to EPR policy. And then, yeah, so I think that's pretty much the list that I have, so.
Great, thank you, Ashley. Ben?
Okay, great. A lot of what I was going to bring has already been addressed. I'll say that one of the issues is getting people, the generators, whatever scale, to want to participate in the recycling process, the organics recycling process. So Illinois has among the highest number of ride-along programs, but the adoption in each community is relatively small. And even places where it's not a ride-along, but there is a preferred vendor or an accessibility through a vendor in a town, adoption is a challenge. So we need to get people to want to do this, even though they don't have to do this. Contamination mitigation, of course, is a significant problem. It's a problem at the education level. Not having consistent guidelines is a challenge, and if we can somehow find our way there, so that there is some universality, so that, like I think I said it before, you can move from point A to point B and know you're doing the right thing. The other is hauler transparency and compliance with the processor's guidelines. It's kind of a taboo space. Some know, some don't know, and some who know are told not to tell. And it's not anything malicious. These are businesses. They have their reasons for doing what they do. And then sometimes we need to just get in there and make sure we do what we need to do as a society. I'd also say that this is along the lines of education. We have other associations, user groups that we should be in dialogue with. We should be doing webinars together. We should be teaching their constituents about the benefits of compost. Getting to those groups, getting engaged with those groups is challenging, but we have to do that so that we develop those markets. And of course, funding from every step of the way, from the projects to the education to the acquisition of the compost, if it's a farmer that needs to pay for the product or the application. I think I'd stop there.
Okay, thank you. Katie?
Yeah, some of the greatest challenges that our members face is budget. Not a lot of sports venues have a dedicated person to sustainability. It often falls under somebody else's role, like operations or facilities, sometimes even sponsorship. So the amount of dollars that are put towards sustainability just isn't large quite yet. That's not to say it might change in the future. So that's one of the biggest challenges. The other challenge, like many of you have already iterated, is education. So when it comes to signage on the bins and being able to relay the messages through broadcasting on your marquee board, athlete engagement is a huge one. We all know that the influence and the influencers of the world is very large. And if they can spread messages like this, it can reach a much broader audience, because we all know sports has a huge audience. Sometimes it seems like the world follows sports more than they do the news nowadays. So that's what we rely a lot on to create education. The Green Sports Alliance as well is an educational tool. And I'm just going to put a link in the chat. We have a playbook that's actually dedicated to composting. It's called Food Waste Diversion and Compostable Packaging. So if you want something to read in the meantime, that'll help you out when coming to, or if you're dealing with a sports venue or stadium. And And then the biggest, not the biggest one, but another one is packaging. And like a lot of you have already talked about, so a lot of the front face packaging it seems like we've accomplished. Most stadiums have gone compostable or are at least thinking about it. The biggest issue is the back of house packaging. So that all comes from the manufacturer. And these are, you know, the big food items that come in the huge plastic bags. And that's something that, you know, needs to be addressed and figured out, because even the stadiums that don't have landfill bins, like for example, the CPKC Stadium in Kansas City, they don't have landfill bins front facing, but they still have to have landfill because of their back of house. So that's one of the biggest challenges that we're facing right now.
Thanks, Katie. I'm going to read Olga's. So Olga says the #1 challenge is the lack of curbside food waste collection programs across the country. Without widespread composting infrastructure and collection programs, our members do not have certainty that the compostable packaging they design, manufacture, and use will have the opportunity to be composted. They also struggle with how to educate consumers and communicate a package's compostability across the US, where it may be accepted in some markets and not in others. We're going to go next to Kate.
Yeah, so for work, greatest challenges for our membership, of course, you know, what we hear about the most is contamination. It's the perennial problem for composters, and permitting new facilities as well. Odor complaints, if the facility is, you know, producing odors, that of course affects neighboring communities. But I'd say contamination is the thing that we hear about the most. The other thing is that, you know, just putting these programs into place at the state level, at the local jurisdiction level, doesn't mean that we're actually getting the entire result that we're intending. So, you know, putting systems in place to make diversion, you know, proper sortation of our waste to be super intuitive, super easy, that is the challenge. And with incredibly good education, right? I can say as a municipal person myself, this is really hard, and it's not just like, just go out and do it, right? Especially if you're dealing with a large community like City of Seattle, for example. And you know, one of the things, and you know, we all know this who are on this call, but solid waste systems disproportionately rely on human behavior to make them work. And if you compare that to other utilities and large municipal services that we receive, it's so much larger. So you can compare it to like turning on a switch to get your electricity, or turning on a faucet to use your power, right? It requires like actual human behavior and everybody doing the right thing. So how do we get everybody to sort all of their organics and not put any of the garbage in? That is the challenge.
Thank you. All right, and now last but not least, Neil.
Well, everybody stole my thunder, but besides my policy work, I also have a permitting practice. So I've permitted 45 facilities in 23 counties in California. And costly permitting and infrastructure development costs are a key challenge. So our high bar for limiting environmental impacts and creates barriers for siting and operating new facilities. This facility, in my background, is I spent 11 years working on siting and permitting it, everything from negotiating the contracts with the county to selecting the general contractor that built it. It's designed to handle over 180,000 tons per year, costs $40 million. It was at capacity 6 weeks after it opened in 2022. We're almost finished permitting the expansion of this facility by another 40%. California needs another 50 facilities like it to meet our goals under SB 1383. The second challenge, as Kate mentioned, is contamination. So mostly from the poor separation of plastics and other packaging materials from generators, whether they're residences or businesses. It's a key to reducing overall costs for operating and maintaining facilities, and creating clean, marketable products that can meet market needs, particularly for farmers who represent about 3/4 of the sales here in California. So my operators cannot jeopardize the viability of these substantial investments by having to receive and process packaging that adds to their contamination challenges and then puts a burden on their operational and disposal costs.
Great. Thank you, Neil. All right, we have one more question, Candy.
So the final question is, what should other stakeholders in the supply chain, the solid waste management system, and regulators take into consideration when problem solving around the issues that you've raised? And so if you can talk about what would be the most helpful. And we're going to start with Frank.
Well, I think it's been mentioned in some of the other questions. I think everybody is responsible for consumer awareness and consumer education. So I think that's a big thing. That's where it all starts. Obviously, if we have clean source separated materials, it's much easier to process from a composter standpoint. And then I think it was also mentioned about labeling, standardizing, national standardization of labeling and identification of compostable products that handle food scrap. I think it's important that they handle food scrap, and we don't develop compostable cell phone cases and shoes and all these other things, because that just clouds the issue. And I think if it starts there, I think that that standardization has to be regulated, and the lookalikes, they have to be fined. I mean, it just you have to have some teeth in these languages on a state level. But I think a national law would go a long way in trying to get the lookalikes out of the situation of being mixed in. Obviously, the education part's important from the consumer standpoint. We have to really dumb it down. It has to be dumbed down, and I think you need to start with some of the real basic stuff that makes a lot of sense. I think those are some of the things that this group should definitely take in consideration. And then also, I mentioned it before, supporting any of the policy and lobbying efforts that we have on a federal level on getting data like the compost, the Recycling and Accountability Composting Act, as well as getting more education, and see if we can get some funding either through EPA or USDA for a national program on consumer education.
That's great. Thank you, Frank. Ashley.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to echo the education because it is really key messaging to the customers, messaging from our side, understanding the challenges, like, these forums have been great, understanding what each stakeholder, like what their challenges is and how we can, potentially solve those problems or, help alleviate that, that sort of education for us in our industry, and then us educating outside of our industry is really is key. Education everywhere is needed, really. It seems like. So, I really appreciate this whole process, just really being honest and open, and, there's going to be pain points and things that we don't agree on, but I think there is definitely going to be a way forward. So, I think education everywhere is really what is needed, in understanding and some common ground. So.
That's so great. Thank you so much. Benjamin.
I'm going to echo it, but Ashley just said, tearing down these silos, communicating with each other, so important. It's such an important project. I would say another important issue is to level the playing field. Neil spoke in detail about the permitting and siting issues, but we have, an issue where you have unpermitted, unregulated operations, and there is sometimes engagement of those facilities by and with municipalities and haulers, and there's no regulation. These things go unchecked. So the folks who do the right thing, get their facilities up to speed and operate responsibly, are at a disadvantage. So we need to make sure that as much energy is placed in regulating the responsible players and permitted players goes into knocking out those who are not doing things properly and creating issues. Access, I think, is another one of these things to take into consideration. If you have a certain amount of grant money and you apply that money to a solution that won't survive beyond that initial grant period, that doesn't seem like prudent use. So it seems that finding the right solution for the right environment is something we really do need to keep in mind, so that when we do have the revenue to throw at a problem and work toward a solution, we're using it responsibly and maximizing that benefit.
That's great. Thank you. All right, Katie.
Yeah, I mean, I can really just echo what everyone else has said. As for the regulators, it's really just a matter of making it mandatory, and then everything else kind of falls into place. It's, you know, it could take years, it could take a decade to finally get it, you know, going smoothly. So yeah, that's really the biggest thing that we could do, in my opinion. As far as supply chain and solid waste management, like supply chain just needs to, they all just need to get on the same page. Like I said before, supply chain needs to take into consideration their packaging. Solid waste management needs to take into consideration, you know, how they're separating and what we can do in order to do that. A lot of folks in the sports industry have green teams that have folks sift through all the waste and separate all of it in order to have cleaner streams at the end of these huge events. And then just making sure that waste management is taking them to the right places, because oftentimes, you know, folks will just pick up bins when it's not necessarily the bin that they're supposed to pick up, unfortunately. So yeah, it's just a matter of like all of us being able to communicate clearly, and then I think we can keep on moving this needle forward.
That's great. Thank you so much. I'm going to read Olga's response. So clearly certified, clearly labeled compostable packaging needs to be included in food waste composting programs. This packaging can help get more food waste into the composting bin and actually reduce contamination from other look-alike non-compostable packaging. It would be most helpful to see cities start and grow curbside food waste composting programs and allow businesses and consumers to put certified packaging into collection bins. And so going to shift to Kate with Ward.
Great. I'm going to center my response around compostable packaging, since that's really what we're all here for today. And I just want to start by reiterating my previous point that we need systems in place to reduce contamination and to facilitate organics collection for processing. That we need to making the right choice to be the easiest and most intuitive choice for everybody along the system. It's really, really important. And one way that we can do that is by having compostable items to help collect food waste. So things like compostable bags. That's one way that we can reduce a barrier. So it's like, it can't be that collecting everything in the garbage is a whole lot easier and cheaper than to separate and expect people to actually do it, because we're relying on human behavior to drive this whole system and process. That said, if something says it's compostable, it really needs to be compostable. It really, really does. And we cannot have non-compostable items resemble those that are, because it is far too confusing. Here in Washington State, we do have a new, compostable products labeling law. And yet, and it's pretty good. It's actually like really good. And there's still a lot of confusing things out there. So for example, like takeout containers, if they're compostable, then they have to say compostable and have a certification mark on them. You can still have, say, like a takeout container that is brown and made from craft paper, but it is, lined with petroleum plastic, and it might say eco on the bottom of it. That is way too confusing. It is so confusing. Here's another thing that I will never not say if I'm given the opportunity, is that we need produce stickers to be compostable. We need produce stickers to be compostable. We cannot expect food scrap composting with plastic stickers on everything. And I know that there's a lot of people out there who are like, oh, because I also work for City of Seattle, you guys need to just inform people that they need to pull it off. Sure. And you can tell everybody in the back of a kitchen to also spend an extra minute to do that. Like, are you kidding me? But here's where this like whole argument totally breaks down. When you get a shipment of apples in from New Zealand and they're spoiled and they need to go to a compost facility, nobody's going to take the plastic stickers off. They need to be compostable. So I really think that we just need to be thinking about all of the food contact materials need to truly be able to break down at a compost facility. And then here's another thing, is that we need compost facilities to be designed and to have their operating procedures optimized to break down compostable items if they are accepting these materials. That we cannot design and optimize the operating procedures to just break down food waste or yard waste or manure and throw in another feedstock like compostable food packaging and expect it to break down the exact same way as like a banana peel. So it's a part of the puzzle that I think is not talked about enough. And it needs to be. In the composting world, we do not design a biosolids composting facility and a food waste composting facility and a manure composting facility to all operate the exact same way. The same consideration needs to be taken into account when we're talking about composting food serviceware.
That was great. Thank you so much. So Neil, you're up next.
So, I'll go back to this. This is a tremendous effort, both nationally and then here in California, to really address global warming issues. And for SB 1383, reducing methane generation at landfills is only a small part of that law, but it's the part that we're dealing with. And it's a two-edged sword. So it has led to significant increases in the collection of food materials. But the massive amount of food adjacent plastic is causing unprecedented contamination issues that continue to increase. So you have a whole bunch of new consumers, new generators, marginally educated, unrecognizable packaging, new collection programs that may not be clear and always be consistent. People are asked to meet that challenge, and they're failing miserably. But food serviceware is only a small percentage of the food adjacent plastic. So 95% of it is from retail food packaging. How we get past that is still a challenge. That is a massive undertaking. We tend to focus a lot on food serviceware, and I think for the most part, those companies are doing a pretty good job of creating products, but they're overwhelmed also by the lack of regulation over confusing products. So I went online last week. I can buy clear compostable plastic cups for restaurants all day long here in California, a product that has absolutely no use in this space. It just confuses consumers, isn't going to be composted, it's unrecognizable as a compostable product, and once it's in a load of food material, it certainly is not differentiating itself from the rest of the stream, as it's usually compacted and covered in food. So the operating costs that increase significantly that come along with processing out all of this new packaging and plastic material specifically is a problem. So SB 1383 created all these changes in the management of organic waste here in California. A lot of investment by local governments. Rates have been increased. They've added standardized bin colors, rolled out millions of bins across California. And new trucks, new collection, new processing infrastructure. And the jurisdictions have already gone to the ratepayers and said, hey, this is what it's going to cost. Now, if we increase our costs further for these new challenges on contamination reduction, there's a real limited ability to go back to the ratepayers and increase those rates again after just a short period of time. So, you know, after all that being said, you should know I'm a huge supporter of compostable packaging as part of a solution to replace disposables. But we have to create a packaging system that works, and we have to be able to, as Kate mentioned, we have to have clear standards around identification that are implemented so that we can exclude a lot of the fraudulent, confusing products that are out there that are really the source of most of that contamination.
That's great. And you know, you're hearing from all these different panelists, just some really important points about where simplification and across the system is so important. And, you know, when you think about the journey of either food or a compostable product, all the way to its intended outcome, which is at this point, compost manufacturing facility, all of those different touch points. So that's what we're talking about here is, you know, that whole system, it needs to come together to talk about what is real for the whole system and how materials move through so that improvements can be made across the whole. And so all of these incredible investments and you know, all these incredible intentions about compostability are realized for the products that are compostable and for all the organic materials that we can get out of the landfill. And so we've got a little bit of time, which is great. We've got a question in the chat that Ariel is going to share out to the panelists, and then we have an extra question that we're going to ask at the end. And so again, if you have questions, we would love to hear them. Please put them in the chat. If we don't have time to get to them today, what we're going to do is gather them, share them with our panelists, and create a Q&A document. And so again, use the chat, and we'd love to hear your questions.
So let's go to Linda's question in the chat, and you may have read it, you may have not, but I'll just read it briefly. So we've talked about education and labeling, a nationwide education campaign to teach consumers about why to compost and how to compost and the real purpose of compostable packaging in composting. With all these groups working and singing in the same song, would be an amazing thing. Any comments on whether this could be possible? And this is directed to any of the panelists. You don't necessarily have to hear from everyone, but if anyone has a particular opinion or thought, you're welcome to share it. Ashley?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it's possible. I mean, you see all these campaigns for recycling, you know, recycling is real. Everybody remembers the Indian that was actually an Italian crying because of all the pollution. You know, it just takes funding, right? And that's really where, you know, you need the infrastructure first of all as well, especially, you know, infrastructure that accepts packaging. So you know, it's kind of a little cart before the horse, I think, because yeah, you need the access first, in my opinion.
Okay, can I just jump in here? Is that allowed?
Yes, please.
Okay, thanks. I hear what you're saying, Ashley, that, you know, it's like a cart before the horse thing. The thing is that everybody can still learn about the benefits of composting. And I think for this to really become mainstream, that it needs to be well understood. The benefits need to be well understood across the nation. It needs to be a cultural norm. So when I was a kid, there were like, you know, all of these litter campaigns, right? Because littering was actually pretty normal back then, right? And now it's not. And that really, I think, should be the end goal, that we now make not composting or not recycling as like foreign and weird and just like totally unacceptable as littering. And so that can be done by first starting to tell people that like, hey, composting is a way to, you know, conserve resources, to improve soil health, to mitigate climate change. And then you can play as you are able to in your own community. If that means, you know, you're doing it in your backyard, or you have a worm bin in your apartment, or you can put all of your you know, yard and food waste and compostable materials into a cart for municipal pickup like you can in places like Seattle and San Francisco, great. But that baseline cultural ethic really does need to be started somewhere. And that is something that we can do on a national level.
And I'm not disagreeing. And I've been saying education this whole time, right? And so I understand that. I think I don't want residents and customers to get frustrated and then just say, no, thank you. Like, oh, great, composting. Where can I compost? Oh, there's only 100 composters in the US that actually accept this packaging. So I understand, I agree that you do need a campaign. You do need to bring awareness to this issue. But I don't want the average everyday person to get frustrated with the lack of availability. So that was my cautionary.
I would say
And
this is, we're talking about the adults in the room, and I would say let's not lose track of a profoundly valuable resource, and that's the youth. If we can get some sort of a standardized message, a good comprehensive educational program, an on target, you know, explanation of what is compostable, what is compost, I think we can get those schoolrooms rocking and rolling, those lunchrooms where the kids are motivated and have, you know, cart monitors so that their peers don't misclassify the product. Take those lessons, teach them in the schools, let those kids carry the messages back to their homes and their parents. Let's not lose track of that opportunity.
right. Any, Katie?
Yeah, something having to do with recycling and composting. There was an instance recently, shout out to St. Louis SC. They, you know, they're partnered with their beverage provider, and they demanded to have no plastic in their stadium. And the entire purpose of that is to say, if you don't comply with what we want, then we're just going to go with somebody else. So like overall is that there are so many different options out there when it comes to everything in the United States. So if one person you know, won't meet your demands, then the next person will. So it's not impossible to start to, you know, create these scenarios, especially in huge venues like this. So, you know, just something to keep in mind.
Thank you. Anyone else have anything they'd like to add on top of that? We have one other question that we could open up to the group.
Yeah, I'll add to that, Ariel. So I think your next fifth question there is something we haven't talked about at all, and that is extended producer responsibility and EPR laws that are cropping up across the country, and discussions about having a national EPR law. I think for this group, it's, you know, really important that those EPR laws include compostable packaging and the ability to have infrastructure funding and development to be a part of the circular solution, to try to address that lack of infrastructure across the country that Ashley's talking about. It's, you know, I've been doing this a long time, talking about compostable packaging for 20 years. I'm still waiting for the first compostable packaging manufacturer to invest in a composting facility. So I'm welcome to help set up partnerships, and when people are willing and ready to do that, I'm certainly can make that happen. I helped develop a lot of facilities, and but a lot of them have challenges with financing and funding, and that's you know, a significant barrier to getting facilities on the ground. But EPR should not be sold short. It's one way that we can help fund that type of infrastructure investment in areas where it certainly isn't even considered right now. A lot of local governments have to put mandates in place, develop programs, get ratepayers to fund them in order for that to happen. And that is a tall order in a lot of areas where other kinds of government services. There are a lot of folks who want much less government than they have now, but B, this is a big leap forward for rate increases to create these programs in addition to their current solid waste and recycling programs. Many parts of the country don't even have recycling, so calling products recyclable is somewhat of a myth. So that EPR process is for it to matriculate and have the packaging manufacturers be have a more robust presence in managing that, the ability to get infrastructure on the ground, contribute to that. And then when people talk about telling the story and getting out that message like Kate talked about, which is so important in this, there's nobody that's better at telling stories and getting people to change behavior than product manufacturers, brand owners. They're the experts in getting you to feel about their product, and that is what ultimately needs to happen. So as part of this PRO, producer responsibility organization planning process that's underway here in California, and I'll have to say I cannot speak on behalf of the SB 54 advisory board that I'm a member of, but that is an element of their PRO plan that I think will be critical in having those brand owners and packaging manufacturers telling the story about those environmental benefits of their products, and being a part of that solution to help get the word out that this is the new paradigm. These are the new behaviors that we need to model, and this is the pathway towards a more sustainable future, and why it's important, you know, again, addressing climate change and just actually having a circular pathway for resources so that we're not wasting considerable resources by landfilling them.
Thank you, Neil. Yeah. Our last question is there anything we have not asked you that you'd like to share? So I would just kind of like open it up to the panels. If you have something that you want to respond to Neil's comment, add on to it, kind of get that dialogue going, or if there's something else that you'd like to introduce, you're welcome to. We have about 10 minutes left.
I would just like to say that I agree with you, Neil, that composting needs to be at the table in EPR discussions. Composting these compostable products takes more, it costs more. And so therefore the compost manufacturers should be compensated in that system. And that's all there is to it.
And just going back through our panel, yeah, anything that we haven't asked about that you wanted to share. And so, Linda, I know Frank had to leave. I wanted to check in with you and see if there's anything that you would add to the conversation.
Well, I know that I had prepared if Frank wasn't going to be here for the last question, I was going to remind everyone that the compost industry is really about healthy soil. And that is one of the big drivers that everyone along the stakeholder chain, if you keep that in the back of your mind, and that we are businesses like everyone else who want our employees to make a living wage or better than a living wage, that kind of backs up what Kate said, what many others have said. which is why we're having this big conversation about how to make circularity work for everyone. So that's just what I would add.
That's great. And then Katie wanted to circle back around with you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just gonna iterate what I said before is a lot of it is education. You know, Kate has been talking a lot about San Francisco and Seattle and how, you know, we used to litter and now we don't because we learned. So like the world is transforming into learning how to do this. If you guys saw the news about France, like the entire country of France now has laws and regulations pertaining to compost, and the EU itself is really, you know, making waves in this industry. So I know the United States is a bigger beast to tackle because we have a lot more land, but that's not to say that we can't all get on the same page and you know, work together. And yeah, if you're interested in joining the Green Sports Alliance, if you think that your product or innovation or your service could help sports become more sustainable, then I would love to talk to anyone who wants to chat.
That's great. Thanks, Katie. And then Neela and Kate wanted to see if there's anything else that you wanted to close with, or Ashley.
I'll just add on to what Katie said is, you know, I think there's been a lot of great developments in sport venue sustainability and programs that are really moving the needle, and that is wonderful. The challenge with it is it's a relatively, I wouldn't say easy or simple, but it's much easier and much simpler to do it in a closed loop system where you have that ability to set the boundaries around the materials that are collected, what's introduced, so that you make sure nothing is a contaminant within that system. This, you know, when packaging gets out into the wild, into consumer hands, what is really that's the ultimate challenge is how can we address it in the bigger, you know, chaotic, hopefully someday closed loop system where we can get materials back to reuse and recycling and composting, and you know, across the country. So that's the big challenge. It's, you know, relatively early. Like Frank said, U.S. Composting Council is 34 years old now. Relatively new industry. Still don't have the kind of metrics. Composters are just now starting to provide data to the Bureau of Labor Statistics as part of the business census that they do biannually. So all of those things are starting to line up to a way where we're going to start having a better understanding of what kinds of green jobs we're creating, what kind of revenue streams are being developed, and how, in a broader sense, that we can fit this into our societal infrastructure and service providers at local levels across the country, so that everybody's on the same page about what the cost impacts of developing infrastructure are.
Thank you. And Ashley and Kate, any last words?
Yeah, you know, I alluded to this earlier, but one need that I really see for our industry, and particularly around compostable food service packaging, is that we need research. We need to fund research to better understand what processing conditions we can use to optimize the degradation of these compostable materials. We know in some facilities they're better at breaking down bioplastics, and others they're better at breaking down fiber. It's a bit inconsistent, but if a composter wants to take these materials, then they should have better information about the best management practices associated with their degradation. The other thing is that I think that we should be open to updating the ASTM standards. that are used to certify compostable materials. Those were developed several years ago. They were a great first start, but I don't think that it's fair to say that it should be considered a one and done thing. If there's better available science today, then I think we should be open to updating those.
That's right. Thank you. And Ashley, anything you finished
Yeah.
with?
Yeah, just some final thoughts is I didn't really mention it too much, but definitely, certification of compostable products. We always advocate for third-party certification because we represent manufacturers in the US and Canada, and there are a lot of imports that, might say that they're compostable and they're not compostable. So we live in a global economy, and we need to make sure that if we are moving down an EPR path, that those are accounted for as well. So, and a lot of times they are, but, there are ways that, things are mislabeled quite often. So.
That's great. Well, a couple of things that I want to highlight before we finish today is we just first gratitude and appreciation for all of our panelists. Just so appreciate you being here today. For those of you who followed us from the beginning, this whole series of discovery workshops started in the piles and is working its way through the system all the way to policy. And so we have 4 more sessions to go, and our next session is coming up on the 15th, and that's going to be highlighting compost industry technology and innovation and funding. And so that's going to be our next one. The one after that is going to be the origin and evolution of food contact packaging materials, and just talking about how did we get here, and giving a little bit of that background with everybody that's been involved in that. Our 13th is going to be focused on the municipal perspective and the regulators and agencies, both state and federal. And so looking forward to those folks. And then we are finishing with policy makers and policy influencers. And so, so starting on the 15th, we're going to have kind of 3 Thursdays in a row, and then we're going to jump 2 weeks and do our final one on policy. So just follow on here if you can. Everything is posted publicly on the project's YouTube channel. And so, and then these are open for anybody to attend. And so we put into the chat an RSVP link where you can sign up for the whole series. So if there's somebody who you want to make sure knows about these, great. That's what we're doing this for, is to really highlight and spotlight information about the realities that the different stakeholders in the system are facing, the opportunities that they see are possible, the challenges that are being faced, and then the requests of other stakeholders in the industry. So really appreciate all of you being here with us today. Feel free to share the video. It should be up by the end of the day for folks who missed it. And then we have an entire series of the previous 9 already available on our YouTube channel. Ariel, anything else to share before we finish?
Yeah, I just wanted to cast the net out. Like, we do have space for 1 or 2 more panelists for next week for the technology, innovation, and funding bucket. So if you have someone in your networks that you think would be a really good add to that conversation, please reach out to Candy or I.
No.
But that's all.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's great. And then if you have an interest in being part of our microcosm that comes together for our 3-day strategic planning intensive in September, again, feel free to reach out. And we are looking to build a microcosm of the whole system. And we've got an incredible group of people coming, and want to make sure that we get a balance of all the different stakeholders. So looking forward to seeing you again here in next week. And we'll have everything ready for the YouTube channel in about an hour and a half. So we'll talk to you soon. Thank you so much.